Today marks the start of our third season, so we thought we'd conjure up an episode on a horror movie franchise that is hitting theaters very soon with its brand new installment. So join us as we dive into the Conjuring and the Conjuring greater universe and hope that the spirits in the room behave. This is the No Fear podcast. We know what scares you.
I'm Matt.
I'm Mel.
And I'm Lisa. And this is the No Fear Cast, the podcast where we dissect horror and all the things that scare us. Welcome to our season 3. First of all, Matt and Mel, I'm very excited that we've made it into a season 3 with this podcast. I think that is just fantastic.
Oh, me too. And I've been having a lot of fun. I hope our listeners have been too.
Oh, yeah. Me too. Well, I'm sure you've seen all the creepy advertisements for this new movie, The Nun. Is it The Nun?
I think that's what we agreed it was.
It is. I think
it's the title we gave it.
That's all you need to know about it, and it is. It's called The Nun. It's coming out September 7th in the USA is when it's being released in 2018. And it's written by, at least the story is by James Wan, who is a popular horror director and writer, and he's made a lot of these type of movies. And I will say, just watching the trailer and kind of the clips that they've put out teasing The Nun, it looks like a creepy movie. I mean, there's this very demonic looking nun. It looks like it's set, I mean, it could be, like Matthew Lewis's The Monk. It's got these nice kind of creepy convent-like places and priests and nuns, and it may be set in a different time. I'm not completely sure. I feel like it looks like it's old. It may not be, though. I haven't read much about the new movie, but this is kind of part of a greater universe from what started with the 2013 movie The Conjuring, starring Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga as Ed and Lorraine Warren. And it's set in kind of their universe as they investigate paranormal occurrences. So it's The Conjuring 2, I think Annabelle. Maybe Annabelle had a prequel that was the one with the creepy looking doll. And then now The Nun, which The Nun made its appearance in another movie in the Conjuring series. So I guess people liked it so much they wanted its own thing. It was a picture that I think was in the Conjuring 2 that became haunted. So this is a big thing, I feel like, especially when you're talking about mainstream horror. Have you guys seen any of these movies?
I've seen the first one. That's the only one I've seen.
Yeah, so far I've just seen the first one, The Conjuring.
And thoughts? I'm trying to withhold my idea here because I'm worried it might be a little different from yours, but I don't know. What
I know you want to talk. You want to talk a bit about the background, right? So, which I totally understand. I was kind of unaware of some of the stuff working in the background until very recently. But I like the movie. I mean, I'm more of like a classic horror person with my movies. Not as much gore. Like more psychological or almost like jump scare type thing. And so I liked the, I don't want to say old school, but just the way of scaring you without like getting in your face and going over the top. I like that. And I like ghost hunt stuff, as we've talked about before on the podcast. So I was kind of interested in seeing how you would like make a movie of someone's actual case file.
Yeah, I agree with Mel. Excuse me. I think I've got something in my throat, it feels like. I liked the movie. I liked a lot of it. There were some good, legitimate, creepy, scary moments that definitely got me without just being gory or jump scares. And I'm kind of the same way. I like my horror a little bit more psychological because, I mean, I can watch a gory movie and kind of write that off and just go meh. But if it gets in my head, that's where the real horror is for me. I do feel like it suffers the same problem that a lot of horror movies have, which is the third act of it is just not as good. It feels like it kind of goes downhill. The first two-thirds of it are pretty solid, and then it just kind of is meh for the end. I wasn't super impressed with the ending. Didn't like that part a whole lot, but overall, I mean, I'd give it like, a B-ish, maybe B plus.
Yeah, the end feels rushed to me. I was rewatching it yesterday and I got almost distracted in the end because it was just like, oh yeah, this is what's happening, And it was just too easy. The end was just too easy. It's like, just remember you're a mom and you love your children and you'll be fine, and and just that all makes me angry. The fact that it's all women in the family and they're all going to be possessed and they're victims and they're weak, and then if you just be a good mom and remember that wonderful day with your kids and you're there for them all the time, don't be a bad mom. then you'll be fine. Yeah. It's like, this is a demon. Come on. It's not just like whether you're a stay-at-home mom or not. It's a demon. Like, there's got to be something deeper here.
Yeah, y'all are absolutely right. I think as far as filmmaking goes, I would be willing to give it a B, maybe even a B plus. It was very atmospheric. I like that. And I liked the way it looked visually. I loved the this kind of old abandoned farmhouse that a family is living in, and it's secluded. I loved they had a lot of just creepiness to it, if that makes sense. There was sleepwalking children, and I think somebody levitated at one point, and there was the noose hanging from the tree towards the end, which was supposed to explain, I guess, why the haunting had begun in the first place, and so it allows them a way to end it, which I agree with you, Mel. The ending was a bit rushed, and you could kind of see it coming once you got closer to it, and it does fall victim to a lot of the possession type movies, especially with the female characters, because they're so problematic. It's always got to be the daughters who are put at risk with possession. The mother has to have that, as she said, Melody, just be a good mom and love your kids and never leave them. Which, in other movies, in The Conjuring too, if I remember right, because the nun starts attacking the actual Warren couple and their marriage, and it ends up being kind of like, well, if you just love your husband enough, you'll be okay. So that falls to the same trap that I don't necessarily like, and I agree with you. I'm ready to see some equal opportunity demons, and where they're going to attack you no matter like how pious you are, and no matter how much you love your children or your husband, and they're going to possess old and young, and men and women and children and dogs and cats alike. Maybe that's why I like Stephen King's kind of take on possession, by the way. Because he's willing to possess just about anything in his stories. So, I'm just thinking of like Pet Sematary and stuff. When things come back demonic, I mean, anything can come back demonic. not quite like this. But
I'm sorry. I was going to point out that Lily Taylor was also in the 1999 Haunting of Hill House movie. And it's a similar character. She's just not a mom there.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Oh, and we should go ahead and say that as far as a possession movie, the acting is fantastic. Lily Taylor is perfect. I really enjoyed Vera Farmiga. I like Patrick Wilson. I mean, I like all these actors who are bringing this to life. It was a well-done film. I think, as from the point of view of acting and kind of setting an atmosphere, and it's fun to seeing I guess just the whole aesthetic of the movie as far as their clothes and that sort of thing. And this is one, we should go ahead and point this out, because this is something that follows the rest of I'm going to call it the Conjuring universe, is that this is supposedly based on a real family and their real life experiences. So kind of like an Amityville Horror, it is supposedly based on true events, and that's going to become important because Annabelle is supposedly a real life doll, even though they changed the look of it. I don't know if The Nun is based on something real, but I'm assuming that probably it has some basis in reality, and I'm using air quotes as I say that word, because Ed and Lorraine Warren are real people, and they were real paranormal investigators, and we've talked about them a little bit on the podcast, I think. But I'm just going to go ahead and jump in, Mel, because you know where I'm heading with this.
Oh, yeah.
Because I told you about my distaste for this. The Conjuring universe movies, I think, would have been better served by just making up a pair of paranormal investigators. And there are so many to choose from. I mean, you can go back to any of the occult detective fictions when they were having their heyday. And there are so many that came, I mean, right around the time of Sherlock Holmes on, there are all sorts of investigator-type people. Or you can just make up your own. I mean, I'm assuming James Wan is a very creative person. I enjoy watching his films. But I think I would have enjoyed this movie so much more had it not been Ed and Lorraine Warren, because as living people, they have quite a bit of controversy around them.
Yeah, there's a lot of baggage and in their marriage. Well, he passed away in 2006. And she's still alive. I believe she's 90. Yeah, she's 91. I mean, I don't know how deep we want to get into this, but one of the things I
crack it wide open, Mel.
Okay. There has been reporting and there are allegations that he was in a relationship with a girl that he met and started a relationship with when she was 15, and that this young woman lived in their home for, what was it, like 30 some odd years. And kind of like, people say that they would get her when they would call on the phone. She was supposed to be their liaison. Like, while they were traveling ghost busting, she would take messages and take care of the house and stuff. But it's since come out, the woman herself has said that this is the case, and other people have alleged this, that he was in this extramarital relationship with Lorraine's consent. And there's been allegations that he was abusive toward Lorraine. And I read one article that said that she was she had all sorts of stipulations as to how she and Ed could be presented in the movie. That their marriage had to be like pitch perfect, and this, the strong love and the God bringing them together to fight evil and everything. Like, that was actually like stated that this has to be this way or you're not using our files for movies, is what I read in one of the, I can't remember if it was Hollywood Reporter or USA Today, but one of the articles I read. And so that kind of sounds like maybe she knew that stuff could come out. I don't know. I mean, I want to say these are allegations, right? But this is some of the stuff that was coming out when, I think it started to come out when right after Conjuring 2. And evidently there were conversations. Now the lawsuits against Wan and others and Warner Brothers about The Conjuring are from a dude who wrote a book about the case, and he claims that his book became the movie. The lawsuits I don't think are related to the extramarital affair, but the affair came out in all the lawsuits, everybody suing each other for you took my idea and that sort of thing. So it's like this huge thing that's going on in the background of the whole series.
Yeah. And
did I cover that right?
No, you did.
Okay.
I think you did a really great job, because it is a sticky situation, because as I understand, he was never actually no charges were brought against him. So he was never found guilty of anything as far as like abuse or what I guess would be sexual assault of a minor.
Yeah, this all came out after he had passed away.
Right. So we will just go ahead and say that all of these are allegations, and there is no, I guess, definitive answer. But yeah, he was in his mid-30s when he met her. I think he was driving a bus, and it was Hollywood Reporter, at least, that had a lot of the information. It is on other places, but if any of our listeners want to go and look it up for themselves, I know Hollywood Reporter has a really good article that kind of details everything.
Newsweek has a good one too.
Newsweek, and yeah, like I said, this kind of made its way around, and I remember reading it probably late last year reading about some of this stuff and thinking, why is nobody talking about this, especially since they're still making Conjuring movies, as far as I know. And maybe that's why, from what I can tell, The Nun looks interesting, because it doesn't actually have the characters of Ed and Lorraine Warren in it, from what I can tell. So even though it's tied to them via other movies, this seems to be set apart and kind of its own thing. So I don't know if that's intentional. But yeah, he met this girl when he was driving a bus in Connecticut, and she was 15 at the time, and apparently she moved into their home, and she said it was a love or an amorous relationship. I think that's how she describes it. But that Lorraine knew about it, and that they kind of had this open relationship where some nights he'd be with Lorraine and some nights he'd be with this woman. And yeah, and not only just looking at kind of the ick factor, I think, of that, and then watching them be portrayed as such like a pious and loving couple in these movies. I mean, that's disturbing enough on its own, but I think especially when we talked about, you know, like spiritualism and psychics, and when we kind of went over all of that, and history has told us that often when people go out there and say, hey, I'm psychic, let me help you, especially when money is involved, that does not always turn out great. You know,
I will say this: they never took fees for helping people, but they made their money from lectures and writing books.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, but
but I know what you mean. I know what you. Oh no, I totally understand. I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah. But yeah, it just, yeah, because they did lectures all over the place. They had books, of course. I'm assuming they got parts from money from movies that were, you know, based on their cases. Even, you know, we talked about what was it, Mel? The Enfield haunting. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, we talked about that in one of our was it one of our cult episodes, or was it Possession? But we talked about how it was debunked.
Right. And that is what The Conjuring 2 is based on. It's based on that haunting. And from everything I read about that, preparing for the episode where we talked about it, I think you're right. I think it was Possession, our Possession series, maybe from last season or season 1. I can't remember now. But Ed and Lorraine Warren basically showed up there and were like, hey, let us help you with this. From my understanding, they weren't even invited. They just kind of showed up at the end of it. And in that way, they kind of had a way, well, this is my opinion, and I'm going to say this is my opinion. In my opinion, they made themselves available at a lot of these kind of popular cases of hauntings or possessions, maybe not necessarily invited, but they showed up so that they could kind of lay claim to it. You know, when I'm saying, like, they were like, oh yes, this Enfield haunting, this was us. We helped out in that situation, when really they just kind of showed up for a couple of days at the end.
And they were also involved in Amity.
Right. Yes. Right.
So they're kind of, were acting as paranormal ambulance chasers.
Exactly.
Well, even with the case that The Conjuring was based on, I'm not saying they were chasing after that one. I can't remember if the family got them involved or not. The mother and the oldest daughter, like they and there's actually a picture out there of all the girls who played the girls and the mom and the real life people involved. So they were like, you know, they knew the movie was coming out. There's no rancor there. They actually gave over their notes for the movie, evidently, even though the movie changed a lot from what actually happened. But I don't know if they contacted the Warrens or not, but the mother was possessed at seance, not how it was portrayed in the movie. And after that, the dad threw the Warrens out. He said that they made it worse because they had lived with this haunting for so long, because the Warrens showed up halfway through their haunting. and so yeah, I mean, just because you see the movie or read a report that they like help the family, it doesn't, it doesn't necessarily mean they were welcomed by everybody in these families.
And, well, as you said, it leaves out a lot, and I have a feeling, and this is something, Mel, that you alluded to at the beginning, is that I think the Warrens had a very tight control over their own image and how they wanted to be perceived. So yeah, a lot of what we hear about them was carefully crafted and carefully constructed, and so the people who were maybe looking at them in a less favorable light were kind of ignored. We're kind of pushed to the side. And I don't want to say that I think necessarily that any of the supernatural cases that they investigated were necessarily false just because of their involvement. I think, Matt, what you said, that they were kind of supernatural ambulance chasers is actually a really good term for them, because I think they wanted to turn a profit, and even though they may not have taken money from the people, the fact that they had their museum and they had their books and they had their lectures and they had their kind of tightly controlled image, in the public eye, I think all of that was just very carefully crafted so that they could make money off of it.
All right. While you were talking, Lisa, about the Warrens and their past, it kind of, and we could talk about many people who set themselves up as ghost hunters who maybe helping people, maybe not. I also have a difficult time just saying that everybody that they worked with wasn't experiencing something weird that they couldn't control, but it is interesting how they show up and what happens. And I think we talked about this when we talked about ghost hunters and occultists, as you pointed out, Lisa. So, listeners, if you want to hear more about psychics and ghost hunters and those sorts of situations, you can go back and check out our series on the occult. But I was thinking about how the movie itself, so you could just have a movie about the family moving in the house and the mom getting possessed, but the movie does an interesting thing, and I think Paranormal Activity kind of did this as well, but there's like a distance, I guess, because the movie itself, while it's not a documentary, obviously, it's a reenactment, I guess, or a period piece from the 70s, that's sad. But I was thinking while I was rewatching it that there's almost like a little bit of a distance for the person viewing the movie, because of the fact that the family can go to the Warrens, and that you have these lectures that the Warrens give interspersed where they're showing slides. It's like every time this tension ratchets up, it's then like, now we're giving a lecture, or something like that, or there's a place for the family to go. And I was wondering what you guys thought of that, the kind of almost like observational distance, I guess, of like not following the family completely, but following Ed and Lorraine with their lectures and their discussions with people and their travels and their kid. I thought that was interesting, that your attention is in a couple different places and not just on the family being attacked by the demon.
Yeah, I guess kind of knowing everything that I know now, I don't know if that was intentional on their end. Because I can't tell now, like, are we supposed to be impressed by Ed and Lorraine Warren? And I, you know what I mean? Because knowing what I know now, having looked into the Warrens and not being impressed at all, like, I don't know if that was supposed to lend credibility and therefore make it scarier, which I think might have been the intent, because the only thing I can really compare it to is I think about like the book, the Amityville Horror, which I actually had read before I saw the movies. I think I was in like high school, and it scared the living daylights out of me. The book, just because I was approaching it as this really happened, and this is like one family's account of what happened to them, and that terrified me. And so I think that what you're talking about is that kind of removal for the viewer is supposed to make you feel like you're peeking into somebody's true experience, which you would think would make it less scary, but I think it was to serve to make it scarier, as in like, ooh, these are real people, this really happened. I don't know.
Yeah, Lisa, I agree with you on that, and I feel like the movie The Conjuring suffers from the same problem that a lot of other movies do, where they use that phrase "based on a true story" to try to get you to feel as though it's real and actually happened, when in fact there's actually, I believe, very specific guidelines as to the terminology you can use for based on a true story versus a true story, or like just the various terms in marketing that they can use in the titles. And it all comes down to how true and how close is it to what actually happened is there. And I feel like The Conjuring is attempting to make you, like, try to pull you into the reality of the movie by making you feel like, hey, these were real people, this is a real case, this is all true, it actually happened just this way, when in fact it probably didn't. And so a lot of it is a very Hollywood sort of film. And so yeah, I think I agree with you, and it seems like it's definitely like a marketing tactic almost, to try to get it to spread by word of mouth of how scary it is because it's true, you know?
Yeah, and I think that probably leads to what we were talking about earlier, how the ending seems sped up and almost contrived, because there's only so much you can put in a movie, you know, before you have to just end it. And so maybe that, like, pulling us in kind of by claiming it's like a real life story that we're kind of looking at or peeking into. It's just, in real life, there's no way it would be like, you know, a couple weeks and then all of a sudden she's possessed and they solve it. And I think it's kind of, you're pulled along, and then all of a sudden you're like, no, this this isn't working for me, you know. Also, I still don't understand quite why they keep telling it. Well, they, in all the episodes of Discovery Channel's A Haunting, which I watched when it was on television, that the Warrens were on, they always told the people they couldn't leave, and something awful would always happen to the people because they didn't leave. And then, like, all of a sudden they can leave in this one, and then something bad happens, which I wasn't sure about that logic either. It was almost like, look, we've only got a certain amount of time left. we have to make something climactic happen. And maybe that's because, like, in real life, something like that would have lasted months, not been that quick.
I feel like there's definitely some time compression happening in the movie, especially since they don't give you any sort of dates that you can have a hard and fast idea of how much time is actually passing. So it definitely feels like there's weeks passing as opposed to months, but that's probably a backdoor by the writers, so that they could just say, oh, no, it's not happening as fast as you feel like it. It's over the course of many months, so almost a year or something like that, you know, which, I mean, that happens in a lot of movies, but I do agree that the time scale does feel kind of rushed throughout the movie, that, like, they're not there very long, and then all of a sudden she's possessed and whatnot.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember it feeling rushed the first time I saw it, because I wanted them to linger on some of the parts that I thought were really genuinely kind of creepy. You know, when they're playing that clapping game and they go down into the basement for the first time. That was scary. And
oh, yeah.
Lily Taylor, I thought, played it really perfectly. And I had wanted more moments like that. And so the kind of speeding up of the action and the every once in a while kind of following the Warrens on what they were doing took me out of it more than I wanted to be, because I mean when you boil it down, this is a pretty cut and dry demon possession movie. Like, there's nothing particularly new or surprising about it, but it was done well, and so there were creepy moments. I just wanted more of them. But we've kind of, like, danced around the ending a little bit, because we keep talking about how the ending felt rushed. So I kind of want to talk about that just a little bit, and, like, how they wrapped it up, because I have huge problems with the ending of this movie. Warren's pushed aside. But what did you guys think of the ending?
Well, one, there were so many dang ghosts in the house. It was hard to even keep track of what was haunting what or what was dangerous. When I was rewatching it last night, I was thinking about the maid and the boy and the mom. And then all of a sudden at the end, they're screaming at her because she's Bathsheba, the convenient witch and came from Salem for no apparent reason. And I was like, this is just too much. I mean, there's just so much going on. Like, I agree the film was well done and it was good acting and it was interesting and there was some really cool, creepy moments, but there was so much going on. And even when they would pause and explain the history, it just didn't seem, it was so hard to just focus on what was going on. In the end, I wasn't even sure how what they did could help. Like if Bathsheba was this Salem witch, which, why can't we leave the Salem witches alone? They weren't even real witches. And she was a Satanist. How does telling her to be a good mom stop anything? If it was the maid or if it was the woman who was forced to kill her boy, Rory, maybe that would work. But Bathsheba is a Satan worshiper, so there's no way to talk to her, right? I mean, just screaming her name at her and touching her head is not going to stop her from doing what she's doing. And I just, at the end, I was like almost confused as to why we had all these ghosts and then it ends up this way. And also, like, it's just almost too easy. Like, I don't, it's like, let's throw some tropes in and then it just solves itself.
Yeah, I think what they were going for is that there were a lot of murders and suicides in this house, and it all originated with Bathsheba. So if they could deal with her, then those would stop. And so you have this kind of orgy of ghosts, I guess, coming from this one woman. And so the idea was that the paranormal activity would stop if she was dealt with. But I don't know if that chain of logic, like you said, Mel, really holds up. And the idea in the movie was that she was a devil worshiper and she killed her infant, like her newborn infant, in order to, I guess, worship the devil. And I'm like you, that is such a tired trope. And apparently, so I looked this up, and I don't know how true this is, but because this is all coming, I think, from Andrea Perron, who I think was she the mom originally? Yes. Or
Andrea was the oldest daughter, I think.
Daughter.
The mom was Carolyn.
That's right. Okay, so apparently she wrote a book detailing this, and she talks about this witch, and apparently this was a real woman, Bathsheba Sherman. You can go and apparently look up her grave in Rhode Island. Like, she was a real woman, and she had ties to the Salem witch trials, I think, through a relative. But knowing that she was most likely a real woman and that they based this real character off this woman, it drives me bonkers. Because, like you said, Mel, like, can't we just leave these women alone? But I'm like, okay, this woman probably wasn't even a witch to begin with. She probably wasn't a devil worshiper. She probably was a woman who lost children due to, like, very tough circumstances and hard times, and because of who she was, society decided to say, hey, you're a witch, and now we're still talking about her now in 2018 because somebody made a crappy movie where they made her the villain. That pisses me off.
Well, and I read some things where, yeah, like you said, like the Warrens and the family latched onto her because she had some connection to Salem witch trials. And I'm kind of like, I don't know. I feel like we need to do a little bit more investigation than just say my house is, within 6 degrees of separation of a bunch of people who were killed for being something they weren't. Therefore, I'm being haunted. Like, I don't. Yeah, when I first watched the movie, I just was. If you think of a movie like Paranorman that handles it so much differently, like, we're scared of witches, but it turns out they're not. I'm like, okay, I can get behind this. It's different. But when you just say, the Salem witch trials was a horrible, horrible, horrible epic in our history, of like mob violence and misogyny and just any kind of horrific thing you can think of, racism, and a bunch of people were murdered. And was it 19 people, I think, are like buried right there, and then who knows how many others got swept up in it in the area. And it's you are taking a real person who had nothing to do with any of this name and putting in a movie saying it's based on a true story that they were a Satan worshiper and killed their baby. And I have a little bit of a problem with that. Like, I wish that they had fictionalized somebody.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just from a storytelling perspective too, I'm like you. I wish they had just done a little bit more work in the film rather than taking such an easy way out. Yeah, I did not like that at all. But I will say this before I forget. That reminds me of, there's this book called Hex that came out, I think, the same year as The Conjuring, actually, and it's by a Dutch author. I'm going to butcher his name. Thomas Olde Hoyvelt, I guess, maybe, probably not. But Hex kind of deals with the same thing, because it deals with this small town who thinks it's being, or who that is being haunted by a woman who was killed for being a witch. And the treatment of it is so well done, I think, because you really at times feel sorry for this woman, and for the position she's been put in and the role she's been given in this town. And the townspeople don't come out so great. It sure isn't the kind of pious washing that we get with the, just be a loving wife and mother and you'll be fine. Aspect that we could hear.
And I've heard great things about that book. It's kind of on my to be read pile, but it's pretty far away. I have so many things I want to read.
and it really needs to be moved up to the top, because it's still one. I think about that book a lot, and I read it, a year or so ago. Sidebar: I have nothing else.
Wow. You are done now.
Done. Mic drop. I hate this movie now.
Oh, wow. I just realized that Ed Warren and I have the same birthday. Ugh. Okay, Lisa, while you were talking about the Salem witch angle, which I think we're in complete agreement about that, and this book, if you're talking about that now, yeah, I do feel like I need to move it up. I was thinking about one other thing that bothered me about the end, and that was that this woman has been like thrown all over the place, and yeah, fingernails like ripped up from trying to hang on the wall and keep from being pulled down the stairs. She was burned when she tried to leave the house. Like, she's fallen in a chair, and probably was lucky she wasn't impaled, and then was running through like the vents in the house, like trying to kill a child, and her face was like all messed up, whatever. And then at the end, once she's not possessed anymore, and she walks outside the house, gradually everything heals and she looks completely normal again. And I'm sorry, like, if that all happened to somebody and you had a demon living in you, I think you'd have to go to the hospital and have some recovery time. I just, like, the magical healing when she crossed the threshold kind of irritated me a little bit. It's like, yeah, she's a mom again, and the whole family's happy. Also, that kid would not just hug her. The kid would run away. The kid would be traumatized the rest of her life. It was just too easy an ending for me.
I 100% agree.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that seems to be the way these movies tend to go, is that once they heal everything, that everything goes back to normal and everything is cheery, and that's just, I mean, that seems to be par for the course for these type of movies, because I know in The Conjuring 2 that's kind of the way it is. And by the way, that's another one where the young girl is also the center of it, and it's kind of a family under attack, so it seems to be par for the course, I guess. And in that case, I feel like there's some creepy, I mean, just like in The Conjuring 2, there were some genuinely creepy moments. There was one that involved like I guess an old man that had died in the house prior. It's been a while since I've seen it. But it, and you see the girl take on the voice of the old man, which we've talked about the uncanniness of that. So there are some good creepy moments. There are some good jump scares, I think. It's atmospheric is a good way of describing these movies, but I think just not only the distaste I have for the Warrens and the fact that I don't want to see any more movies that revolve around them, but also just as we talked about the treatment of women. I mean, really, it seems from these movies that if you're not a virginal daughter or a loving mother or like a pious wife, then you get what you deserve, and I don't like that. I don't like that. You know, if you're not quote unquote the good mother, then you must be demonic and devil worshipping and a witch. So yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna have to give a hard pass on any more Conjuring movies.
Well, plus, I feel like with the Conjuring movies, there, like with any franchise that starts strong, there's always a degradation. You know, like I liked the first Paranormal Activity. Don't love it. It was problematic. Same as I feel about the Conjuring. Pretty good horror movie, but you know, had its problems. But everyone after that was just a slow downhill. And I mean, I only saw the first two, and I feel like it's got to be the same way with the Conjuring franchises. And I do want to see the second one, but that's where I'm going to stop. I'm not interested in the Annabelle movies or this new spinoff, The Nun. Not really that interested, because just as films, you know, the quality is almost assuredly going to go down.
Oh yeah, and you know what? If we want a good scary nun monastery movie, then we just need to press some filmmakers into making an adaptation of Matthew Lewis's The Monk, and I think that would be fantastic.
Yeah, I think we need directors now in 2018 to go back to some of those old Gothic books and adapt them. There would be some crazy movies come out of that.
Yeah.
Be some good stuff.
I think so. And let's just go ahead and say, let's leave the Warrens alone. Let's just not glorify them anymore.
Well, I guess that might be probably the perfect place to end it. So, Hollywood, if you're listening, leave the Warrens alone, and otherwise, thank you for listening.